call the special meeting to order, and I'll turn it over to the manager.
Okay, thank you, Chairman, Commissioners. You're going to have a two-part work session today. The first part is going to be dealing with an update to the water and sewer capital improvement program. Also, Ed is just going to showcase for you a new feature we're about to roll out called our CIP Viewer, so individuals can get live information as it relates to our projects. And then also within his presentation, we will be discussing the proposed water and sewer rates for fiscal year 2018 through 2020. The second part of the presentation will be Jeff Yates, who will be presenting an overview of the fiscal year 18 proposed budget, and primarily at a pretty high level. We'll have a subsequent work session probably in a few weeks. We haven't set the date yet, where we talk about kind of the basic principles associated with the budget as well as some of the processes, and go into a little bit of information as it relates to our volunteer fire departments. So with that, I will turn it over to Ed.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Again, our agenda for this afternoon in our presentation is to review the water and wastewater master plan updates, to also talk to you about the changes to our capital improvement program from last fiscal year to what is in the proposed budget for this upcoming fiscal year, and from that to review the impacts on the proposed rates for FY18 through FY20. Just as a point of procedure, as the board knows, we created a Union County Water and Sewer District this last month, and the Water and Sewer District will actually be adopting the rates and then bringing them back to the Union County Board of County Commissioners for approval. So the purpose of this meeting is to give you an overview of what's driving those rates, what those proposed rates look like. We'll be coming to you wearing your other hats, though, as the Board of Governors of the Water and Sewer District for actual adoption of those rates and then approval as part of the budget process in concurrence with the budget process by the Board of County Commissioners. So we did a workshop with the board just a little over a year ago in April 4th, 2016 on our water supply master plan update. The original master plan was conducted in 2009-10, adopted by the board in 2011. And the water plan that was adopted back in that time frame had a number of assumptions on it that I want to go through to really highlight what has changed. So our master plan in 2011 assumed that we would partner with Anson County to meet our future Yakima water supply needs. As the board knows, we currently partner with and purchase water from Anson, and we're proposing to partner with them on an expansion. We were proposing at that time to increase our intervention transfer from Catawba to Yadkin from our current grandfathered amount of 5 million gallons per day to a total of 10 million gallons per day to buy us more capacity from our existing Catawba plant. That then drove an early expansion of the Catawba plant by 2017 to meet those short-term needs in both the Catawba and Yadkin basins. The plan assumed also that we would purchase water from Anson County, increase the amount we're purchasing from them, but that we would not build a new facility in Union. And at that time, since we had not really defined where this water treatment plant would be with Anson County, we did not do a lot of work on our water distribution side from a new treatment plant to see how to get that water from the new plant into our system and out to our customers. So what changed from those initial assumptions some 6 going on 7 years ago? The Catawba River Water Treatment Plant expansion was delayed from 2017 now out to 2025 with a major expansion, as well, what I'll be showing you soon, an initial expansion actually in next year. We have leased additional capacity from Lancaster Water and Sewer District in 2011 through 2019 and are now working with them and have a draft agreement actually showed up in my inbox today to expand that lease out to 2023. Lancaster Water and Sewer District has also secured additional capacity from Charlotte Water that they can bring easily into their system to bring essentially our joint facility more capacity if we need it. Our agreement with Anson did not move forward, so in 2013 the county entered into an agreement with the town of Norwood to construct a new intake on Lake Tillery, and then a new raw water supply into Union County, and a new water treatment plant in Union County. And the Atkins project is being advanced now, trying to have that under operation in 2022, where the original master plan assumed wouldn't be online until 2024. Again, original master plan assuming an initial expansion, significant expansion of the Catawba water treatment plant. So here's our current schedule for Yadkin. We are still in the schedule, and as the board knows, we are in the process of trying to secure our intubation transfer. We are scheduled for a May meeting of the Environmental Management Commission to make a final ruling on that, and hopefully we'll be able to proceed forward after that ruling with our permit into the design and then construction, and have this facility online by the end of 2021. A big concern when we shared this with the board back in a year ago is, can we still afford this plant? And our rate projections at that time for the next 6 years were still very much in line with the projections we made in 2012 as part of the original master plan and updated in 2014. Back a year ago, we did recommend to the board that we increase our water capacity fee from the current $1,200 to $2,400 per equivalent residential unit. But with the issues that we're facing right now on litigation regarding capacity fees, we have not moved forward with that. I can tell you, in the rates that we'll be discussing at the latter end of this presentation, we have stayed with the current capacity fees in all of our rate scenarios, so we did not increase them at all. In the wastewater master plan, again, about a year ago that we met with the board to discuss that plan. Again, the 2011 original master plan was based upon building no new water treatment facilities. Essentially, we would use the existing facilities we have and expand and upgrade those. It assumed a continued partnership with Monroe and actually expanding into a partnership role where we look to rely more on Monroe for the area south and north of Monroe, where right now essentially the areas east of Monroe are what's served by their facility. We would maintain our Crooked Creek Water Reclamation Facility at its current capacity, but any growth in that area would be transferred over to our 12 Mile Creek Water Reclamation Facility. What this plan did was put strong reliance on our existing 12 Mile Creek facility by taking all the areas in blue in the county. So this area on the north that picks up parts of Indian Trail, Stallings, and Unionville would be pumped over to our 12 Mile facility. Crooked Creek would still just maintain service to this existing area, and we're putting heavy reliance on these future growth areas north and south of Monroe to be able to be served by the Monroe facility. What changed is we found that Poplar Road pump station enforcement became very expensive as we looked into outer years. So that was this concept. This is an existing pump station that currently serves this area and pumps over. As this area grows into the future, when we started looking at 2030 and beyond, the upgrades that were required to serve that area by the 12 Mile Creek essentially required us paralleling a lot of pipeline, and that became very expensive. That was one of the big constraints. The other big constraint is when we looked at the pipelines within the city of Monroe, working with the city, we found their pipeline network within the city was not sized to be able to handle any of these areas on the south and very little of what was on the north, without, again, significant expense of parallel existing lines running it through town. So those were the two big constraints that we found as we went into our master plan update. And we came up with a new recommended strategy, which the board approved back in August, that said, let's look to build a new facility on the lower end of Crooked Creek. That facility would allow us to take this Poplar Road pump station offline and bring that by gravity to the Crooked Creek facility. Would allow us eventually to take the old Crooked Creek facility, which is now over 30 years old, 40 years old almost, take that offline and also bring that to the new facility. Would allow us to serve northern part of the area north of Monroe into Unionville with that new facility, and potentially serve this other parts of the county on the north end when and if development takes place there. We also looked at the area south of Monroe and said it was more cost effective to build 1 or 2 regional pump stations and pump that over into the 12-mile plant. What this accomplished for us was creating a new facility that would give us a lot of growth capacity in the whole northern part of Union County. By not bringing all that flow from that area into 12 Mile, really allowed us to pick up this area and stay within the 15 MGD, what we think is really the maximum build out of that plant right now, through 2040 plus time frame. And it didn't require us increasing any of our contractual capacity that we have now, right now with either Charlotte or Monroe. So we found that to be advantageous, and the board approved that as part of that master plan update. That master plan update, when we presented it to the board, we said, again, can we still afford this plant? So we ran some quick scenarios as to what the rates would look like for the next 6 years if we implemented that plan. And at that time, when we met with the board in April a year ago, we were projecting that for 18, 19, and 20, we would need rate increases of 9%, 8%, 8%, and then tailing off after that. And the board looked at that and told us very, very clearly, Ed, go back and do better and see what else you can do to work this program. So we did that, and one of the things we did, the board in August then approved an amendment to that master plan, which essentially took that new Crooked Creek wastewater treatment plant and deferred it out for about 6 to 8 years. And we're able to do that by looking at funding some short-term measures to improve that Poplar Road pump station that we want to get rid of eventually. But with the board's challenge to us, we looked at it from a business perspective, not an engineering perspective, and said we can make a $6-7 million investment in those pump stations, buy ourselves 6 to 8 years of time frame, still save $10 million over the next best alternative, and allow us to really normalize the rates then. And by doing that, we're able to reduce our rate increase with that alone by at least 1%, if not more. So we did that as part of the amended water and sewer plan and have now adopted that and other changes into our capital plan for FY18. So what we're going to walk through quickly now is just at a high level what the proposed programmatic changes are in our FY18 budget that will be coming to you in the next weeks or so, compared to the FY17 capital budget that the board adopted last year. And again, for those listening in, the board adopts essentially a 6-year capital budget is what you look at. You adopt 1 year with a 5-year look forward. And that 6-year program is what we use in our rate modeling. So this, at a high level, you can see this is our project cost from inception of the project through 2022 is the planning horizon we're looking at. And we kept 2022 as the same end date, so even though we're changing our planning horizon from 2017 to 2018 to keep an apples-to-apples comparison of dollars, we kept the planning horizon at 2022. So those are the programs, the major programs that are within the budget, and the board approves our budget on a programmatic basis. And what we've highlighted in yellow are the major changes to that program from last fiscal year to what we're proposing this fiscal year. And I'll walk through each one of these highlighted changes with you. And I've got details on each of these, but just quickly, the 853 pressure zone, that's one of our water pressure zones. It's essentially central Union County in the Indian Trail and north of Monroe area. CRWTP is the Catawba Water Treatment Plant improvements. And you can see on the 853, we added some $4.8 million. On Catawba Water Plant, we added some $18 million. On the Yadkin River Water Supply Project, we added $9 million. 12 Mile Creek added about $4.5 million. And on the back end, the Lower Crooked Creek facility, we took out $67 million and moved that out 8 years. And a new program we created that was not in the budget at all previously was a renewal and replacement program for all of our water treatment plants. And I'll walk through each one of these a little more quickly with you. Our 853 pressure zone, again, is that area in Indian Trail, Stallings, parts of Unionville, just north of Monroe. And we've always had a significant water improvement project there. And the purpose of this project is a new storage tank in Indian Trail. The board just approved purchase of that property. And really getting the major water distribution lines, both from the new Yakin plant coming in from the east and from our existing facilities coming in from the west. And as we've gone into more detail updating the model, we've actually added some 9,000 feet of pipe to this program, and that's really the increase in cost. So we identified essentially additional light that really needed to go up into that Stallings area as part of that program. The Catawba Water Treatment Plant, as we start looking at our current capacity and where we are, we're getting tight, as we've told the board, on capacity. And one of the recommendations that has come forward just recently that the board has approved is to move forward with an initial expansion from the existing 36 MGD to 40 million gallons per day of capacity. Again, sharing that 50-50 with our partner, Lancaster Water and Sewer District. And we're doing that really relatively efficiently. We're putting 4 MGD of new capacity on board for a total of $18 million. We're putting in new additional filtration facilities, which will sit right here, doing modifications to some of the other existing units without having to take them down, just without getting technical. Some of them, one of the unit processes, we can do enhancements to that process to get additional capacity, and new chemical feed facilities. And we'll be splitting that $18 million with our partner, Lancaster Water and Sewer District. So to us, it's going to be about a $9 to $10 million increase to get us this additional capacity. On the Yakin project, as I mentioned earlier, when we did the original project, original master plan, we thought we were going to build a water treatment plant someplace over here. Coming from Anson, we're now looking at a water treatment plant in northern Union County. So we have now done the detailed modeling on how to get that water from here into our system. And as we did the detailed modeling, that added some additional $9 million into that $180 million plus program. So the additional cost is strictly in now identifying exactly where that pipe needs to go, where before we were just carrying a plug number in there. So with better definition, we have good understanding on that. 12 Mile Creek expansion, our challenge there, the bids just came in over our estimate. So it came in some $4 million over the engineer's estimate. We moved money around within our budget last year, current year, to accommodate that, so didn't have to bring back any budget amendments during the year, but it has increased our total amount over the next 6-year planning horizon. And since we're spending a lot of money on this, and I realize most of us here and most of the board do not have the opportunity to go out to the treatment plant too often, our consultant actually put together a rendition for us that we've shared with members of the community. So hopefully this video will work. And we'll run you through and show you what some of the new, so this is an entire new headworks facility that is being constructed, is under construction right now, and that's sitting right at the berm at Kensington Road. Going from there around the existing plant, that's existing tankages, there's a new building going up which houses new aeration equipment that will serve the biological treatment process. So that's a brand new structure that's also under construction. Probably the biggest single expense in the project is on the solids handling side, where we're dealing with all the residual materials and have a brand new facility in there for essentially dewatering those facilities, that sludge that's produced, new odor control associated with that, new odor control associated with the headworks. So that's what these facilities will look like when they're constructed. Again, they're under construction right now. We have major construction here, here, and here, as well as in these tanks that are the heart of the facility are being completely refurbished. Is there other video?
Yes.
Oh, we got 2 videos. All right. So the other video that we share with the community is, again, we have houses right next door to our facility. And as part of this project, this berm is currently landscaped, this berm is not. Some of the board members will recall some of the history we've had. The developer who put this community in was required to build and maintain these berms and landscape them. They went bankrupt halfway through. We settled all that out with ourselves and Waxhaw. So we are landscaping this as part of the project. We'll be irrigating it with reclaimed wastewater, so it'll be a demonstration project also on the use of reclaimed wastewater for irrigation. And we'll show you what a bird's eye or a roadside view looks like as you would drive along the road. I think it'll show a significant enhancement. Right now, this berm is landscape, but it's high maintenance, and we're going to low maintenance landscaping with low trees up front, taller trees in the back, some other shrubbery in between, a little more intensive around the main entrance here coming into the plant, where will be a little more decorative landscaping, bringing it in. As we move out along the road then, these will all be low maintenance natural grasses, so we won't be mowing these. Again, a variety of different trees, high and low, to create a visual buffer. And as we get past the developed area, we drop off to just pines as we go along through the back end of the facility here. Obviously, these trees are what they're going to look like in 10 to 15 years. They won't be quite that big when they go in, but we're putting in decent-sized shrubbery, so we do have a visual barrier from day one.
Yeah, how's that irrigation water applied?
It'll be actually spray irrigation in some areas. Some will be drip and some will be spray. Most of this will be drip irrigation in this area. We have some areas with inside the plant that will also be some spray irrigation. It is permitted for public access since this is outside our fence line. And we actually just got that permit renewed about a month ago.
Will it be marked as reclaimed?
Yes, yes. You know, there'll be nice purple signs out there in English and at least in Spanish saying "Do not drink, no beer," and that this is non-potable water. Again, the other big project change was the Lower Crooked Creek facility, which was deferred until 2025. And again, this is where our existing Poplin Road pump station is. We'll be building new gravity lines to a new treatment plant somewhere in the area of 601 and Crooked Creek in the future. New project that's in the budget that wasn't there before. All right, that did not work. Or it's working, and I don't know it. This should open by double clicking. Yeah.
Not within the presentation.
So I got to close the presentation. Or not within this version. Said we apologize that our latest draft did not quite make it. So let me tell you what this is. As part of our partnership with Charlotte Water and the operation of our wastewater facilities, one of the things we asked them to do as part of this contract is to go through and do an equipment assessment of all of our major mechanical and electrical equipment in the facility. And if I could blow that up and you could read it, what we did for every piece of equipment there with them is assess the current condition of that equipment, its remaining useful life, its current capacity, and its criticality to the operation. Do I have a redundant piece of equipment there to back it up if it fails, or is this the only one I have? What's the consequence of failure if it does fail? And from that, we came up with an overall risk rating, and red being high risk, yellow moderate, blue meaning this is relatively low risk. And we did that for every piece of equipment out there, and again, I wish I was able to open that and you could read it. So we identified the equipment, the manufacturer, model numbers, remaining useful life, estimated replacement. Again, gave a ranking of 1 through 5 on its capacity, its condition, and its performance or criticality. From that, we did a relatively rudimentary asset management approach here that said, okay, if this, looking at those 3 rankings, this piece of equipment is very critical. So the top one in red here said, yeah, this is a very critical piece of equipment. Its remaining useful life, if I can read it, I think it was 5 years or 3 years. So we said we need to budget for the replacement of that piece of equipment in this 5-year window. And that's what we did. And this goes on for pages. This was just a snapshot to show you what it looked like. And from that, we then identified a true renewal and replacement budget for the wastewater treatment facilities. And we're in the process of doing that ourselves with our asset management program for our water distribution and wastewater collection system. And that will be starting to roll out into a budget next fiscal year. So this is a real major step forward in us really going beyond budgeting $2 million for renewal and replacement and hoping it's enough and seeing what breaks, to really identifying what's critical, when do we think it will last until, what do we think it will cost for that piece of equipment to replace it, and really starting to create a 6-year programmatic window of how to look at this equipment. So that obviously added some money to our budget in doing that. So it's the good news, bad news. Good news is we have a much better idea of what we need to be doing. The bad news is we now need to pay for it also. The good news, though, is when we roll that all up together, the net of those changes is a net reduction of $24 million in the next 6 years. And that net $24 million reduction from the CIP we submitted last year to the one we're submitting this year, along with our projected increases in revenue, have really allowed us to take a more aggressive look at our rates and come back to the board with a recommendation for significantly lower rate increases than was projected just a year ago. And again, the two things that drove that were deferring some of that capital by being able to find interim solutions and moving that long-term expense out 6 to 8 years. And our revenue projections continue 2 years in a row to really beat what we had budgeted for in a significant way, to the point where both us and our rate consultants are much more comfortable that the increased revenue we're projecting for the next 5 years is a legitimate dollar amount. Still conservative from a fiscal planning, but we were being way too conservative when we ran these numbers a year ago. So what we're recommending to the board now is, instead of that 9, 8, and 8 for the next 3 years, we're recommending a rate increase. Again, this is where we've been. This is what we were projecting in red, and here's now what we're projecting going forward. And what we're projecting going forward and recommending to the boards going forward is, excuse me, is that we keep with the same 6.5, 6.5, and 6.5 that we had for the last 3 fiscal years, and we carry that through essentially for the next 3 fiscal years. And our projections after that is that you would go for a 4th year, a slight increase in that 5th year as that Yadkin project really comes online and that we're starting to pay off that debt. And then the board can see we drop basically down to cost of living after that, at 2.5%. And our long-term forecast shows that continuing out to probably 2028 when you start to build that new wastewater plant and you'll have to bump up rates. So we think this is a really good scenario where we're able to keep our overall rate increase at 6.5% per year. That is running at about the national average when you look at references such as American Water Works Association, Board Environment Federation. These are the kind of numbers that utilities are seeing across the board. Our cost of operations tend to grow higher and faster than CPI because of power costs, mechanical costs, construction costs. Construction costs is what's driving this program. What's driving us now, and you'll see this as we get into a little more detail, our capital program is what really drives our rates for the next 5 years. Our operating budget obviously has an impact, particularly in the long term, but in the short term it's all about meeting debt coverage. So what does this look like historically, and is this affordable to our community? What we've grabbed here is our actual historical rates that we've charged our customers versus what would have been a 3% annual rate increase since 1999. So we looked at that for 20,000 gallons per day, for 7,000 gallons per day, and for 3,000 gallons per day, with our average customer in that 6,000, 7,000 gallon range. And what it shows is, as the board knows, for a decade we had no rate increases. So from 99 until 2012, 2011, we essentially had no rate increases other than some tweaking of our rate structure in terms of how we dealt with our tiers. So if you looked at just a 3% rate increase over time, which was about what the cost of living for the CPI index for utilities was, We're still below what would have been a 3% increase from 1999 annual increase. And even with the projected increases, we're still below that 3% annualized number at both the low rates and medium rates. At the high usage, we're right at that 3%, and as we go forward, the high usage customers are paying a good bit more, and that's part of our strategy. Our rate strategy is that if you're using 20,000 gallons per month, you're a very high-end user, and we're building a lot of excess capacity to meet your needs, and you should be paying a proportionately higher share of that cost because you didn't pay it in the buy-in. Affordability, how do our rates compare in terms of what other utilities our size are charging? This is a rate comparison tool that comes off the NC School of Government's website. And what they're doing here is comparing the average bill for a customer using 5,000 gallons, and they use 5,000 gallons as a kind of a statewide average. How do we compare with, we set this up with 25 other similar-sized utilities in the state. And you can see when you look at the average of those other 25 utilities, the median is $68.61. We're down to $59.30 for 5,000 gallons. This is combined water and sewer. And with our new rates in place in 2020, we're at $73, where the median is $68. So we're still right at that median number, nowhere near the maxes, and still in their scale, still in a very good range of where we should be. In terms of affordability, the School of Government uses an index that says, that recommends that the combined water and sewer bill to be affordable. They would like to see that combined bill be no more than 2% of the median household income. At 3% is kind of where they draw a red line and say you're going from cautionary into slightly unaffordable. EPA uses a more aggressive number. Their number, instead of 2%, would be 4% for combined water and sewer. You can see right now under our current rates, our average customer using 5,000 gallons per month, again, compared to the median household income, is at 1% of their median household income. So we're in a very affordable rate on average. With our new rates in place, we go from 1.08 only up to 1.34, still well below that 2%. So again, that's average countywide, and those are people that may be watching from home going, well, I'm not average, I make a lot less than that, or some will sit there and go, I make a lot more than that. So we made an effort to break down the county into different census tracts. And for those census tracts, we looked at what the median household income is for each of those tracts as reported through the 2010 census. We then went and looked at what our actual usage is by our customers in those census tracts. And then we're able to compare, okay, with our customers that are using, that are making between $35,000 and $45,000 per year, what is their actual consumption and what is their actual bills, and how does that compare on an affordability level? So that's what these census tracts represent, is the darker the color, the higher the income within those tracts. We had no median household income below $35,000 in our service area. So any census tract below that was outside our service area, and I think was in the Monroe service area. Some 85% of our customer base is at $55,000 a year or higher in their median household income. And when we compare that against this affordability scale, as you would expect, those at high income, our water bills are very affordable. Even though they're spending more and using more water and spending more on water, because of their much higher income levels, they wind up being much more affordable to them. But even at our lower income brackets, where we're in the $35,000 to $45,000, we're still well below this 2% affordability benchmark that UNC puts out. As we ratchet up the rates in 19 and 20, we still stay below that level. And again, I'll point out, only 3% of our customer base is in this level. 80, and that makes more than close to 97% in this level, 85% in this level. So I think the message we have, the good message we have to our community is yes, we all hate doing rate increases, but we're undertaking a huge capital improvement program here to really catch up with needed capacity in water and wastewater. There's a reason we didn't do rate increases for 10 years as a county. We weren't building the infrastructure we needed. We're well on our way of implementing those programs now. As we pointed out earlier, we're under construction with our regional wastewater plant. We're doing improvements to our Crooked Creek facility. These are long overdue, and even with these major capital improvement programs, our rates are still very affordable and are still at or below the average for similar sized utilities throughout the state. So here's our recommended plan to the board.
Next slide.
Next slide. Sorry. Here's our recommended plan to the board. And I apologize, ignored this green line. That's one of the ones that got hung up in our last rendition. So our recommended plan, it's not alternative two, it is our recommendation to the board. The board knows we ran through a number of different scenarios and looked at how to tweak this one way or the other to make this work. And we're most comfortable recommending the 6.5. The average rate increase to our customers is in the order of $4, and that's based upon this 5,000 gallons per month. So we're not looking at huge increases, but we are looking at about a $4 per month increase. Shelley, you know those other numbers off the top of your head? Or can you bring
Well,
them?
at 3,000 gallons per month, you're looking at around $3 average, and at 20,000 gallons per month, more in the $14 per month range.
So yeah, if you're at that 20,000 gallon per month range, you're already paying probably $100, $200 a month in your water bill. So if you're willing to do that, thank you very much, and yours is going to bump up, $10, $12, but still at that 6% rate. We're recommending that the 6.5% be applied uniform across. It applies equally to water and wastewater, and we're recommending that we do not change our rate structure other than apply the 6% rate increase uniformly across that structure. We reviewed that with our rate consultants. They are comfortable with that. Our only concern was how much can you keep adding onto the top tiers before it becomes problematic. We did a review of our top tiers against other utilities that have these inclining block rates, and we're not overly aggressive yet. We certainly have aggressive rates, but we're not as aggressive as others, so we think there is still room in there. And with that is our recommendation to the board in terms of rate, that it would be, again, what we're recommending to the board, and we'll be coming back to the Water and Sewer District, will be a 3-year rate approval, same as the board did 3 years ago, and same as the board did 6 years ago, approving 6.5% rate increase for FY18, again in 19, again in 20. And the projections going forward would be 6.5, 7, and 2.5 for the following years, and then really tapering off the cost of living after that. The other thing I did want to point out on this slide is our debt coverage ratios. Our bond covenants require that our debt coverage be at a minimum of 120%, 1.2. And what our debt coverage is, our bond rating agencies and the people that loan us money to do these capital improvement programs want to make sure that we're generating enough revenue not only to pay our day-to-day operating expenses, but they want us to pay our day-to-day operating expenses, our debt to them, but they want enough money left over to cover that debt by an additional 20%. So they're saying, we don't want to see you put together a budget that's so tight that you just pay your bills. We want to know that you're paying your bills and you've got some cushion, and that's what that 1.2 ratio is. The board's target to us is actually 1.5, and that's in our current financial policy that the board approved. And as you can see right now, we are well above that 1.5. And we've been banking money in the last few years to help defer future rate increases and to help pay for capital expansion. So the wastewater plant under construction right now was funded by cash and will be reimbursed by new debt. The Crooked Creek facility under renovation is funded by cash. So we've been tapping into that cash, but we haven't grown it. So with these rates, we come down into, we come out of green, we come into a yellow cautionary zone, not critical, but say, okay, you're now below your 1.5, you're still above your 1.2. We get 1 or 2 years here, they get a little tight, and then start improving again in the out years. So the message, again, in these early years, 2019 through 2023, really the debt is what's driving our rates. The tweaking we did going back and forth with numbers was to see how far down we could drive this before we turn this red. And this as far as we could go before we turned it red. So we're comfortable, they're good numbers. Jeff could certainly speak to the financial management they do. We think these numbers are conservative. They assume all your debt at the beginning of the year. Jeff and his team do a great job of balancing out that debt and when we need to issue it, how we issue that debt to make sure we maximize these numbers. So that we think as we get into actuality in these years, these numbers will actually look better than this. And with that, before I get into our CIP view, I'm happy to answer any questions the board members may have.
Questions?
All right. Well, now we have a fun toy that we want to show you and show the community. And this is a web application we'll be launching shortly. And we wanted to preview it here with the board today. One of the things we've been working on, again, we're spending some $500 million over the next 10 years on capital improvements. We thought it would be a very good idea if we created a tool that gave our community better access to information about that project other than having to drill down through budget documents and see what we're budgeting or call us up and go, what is that construction you're doing over there on Providence Road? So we've created this CIP viewer, which will allow the board or any member of the public that go on our website to zoom in and look at information on our capital improvement program. We'll be updating some of these projects. The bigger projects we'll be updating monthly. The smaller projects maybe just quarterly. Our goal is to actually tie it to a project information system where it'll be more real time. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Luke Fawcett, who put this all together, and have him drive this.
A live demo. What could go wrong, right?
What could go wrong? You could crash the system like we did doing the update on the PowerPoint.
Okay, well, thanks, Ed. You're presented, like Ed said, with a lot of information from our master plan, our capital improvement program. So to put it simply, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So we wanted to put this little application together for our customers, our stakeholders, our citizens, just to show where exactly our capital funds are going and describe in a little bit more detail where these projects are and what they look like. So this is the CIP viewer. It's a web mapping application. It's very similar to other mapping applications that you're familiar with on the web or through your smartphone or other mobile device. So it's pretty easy, pretty intuitive to navigate around. It displays the location of each of these active capital improvement projects and then some corresponding details. So I'm just going to navigate, show you a few ways to navigate through this and how you can access the information. And what I'll show you here first is just a basic click and display of a feature. So, for example, here I'm going to click on, this is a building project within the county. So far, so good. This is the new Health and Human Services building. It shows you estimated project cost, some status, a schedule of the project, and then some other additional details if you want to drill down into maybe some pictures or some other information that's associated with that project. So you can do that, click and display with moving into these projects. Here, I think, is a short water line. This is a galvanized water line replacement program, so you're able to pick up those as you just want to navigate through it by clicking. Another means of navigating this app, I'm going to just show you the filtering here. So we have categorized these capital projects in 3 different ways: water, sewer, buildings. Pretty straightforward. For this example here, I'm going to open up the sewer category, and we can either look at sewer facility improvements or sewer system improvements. Facilities happen to be one of the projects that we already looked at. I'm going to navigate down here to the 12 Mile Creek expansion project and open that up. It zooms to the project, and then we're able to see again that corresponding information for cost and status, and then additional info with this project, whether it's maps or some different detailed text if you want to navigate through there. This is how our water category is broken down, so you can look at facility improvements, system improvements, or our different galvanized replacement programs, or our short line water extension programs. Another way that you can use this map is if you are a citizen and you're interested in the activity that's going on around you. So you can type in an address. For this example, I'm going to type in just an intersection. So this would be Old Monroe Road and Midway. And it shows a 3-mile buffer radius around that point, and it picks up all of the projects within that 3-mile radius. So, for example, here's the Indian Trail water tank that was near that intersection, and it'll give you the information up here on the top left, project cost, the status, and then other relevant information. So a pretty simple tool, and like Ed said, we plan on updating this regularly with our active projects. And have some ideas, some cool ideas for future expansion with this as well. But this will be going live and corresponding with our new website here pretty soon. We've got to polish up a few things, but that's the viewer.
Very cool.
We thought since we were talking about water sewer CIP that we would show you a new tool that Public Works has developed.
Thanks for your time. Thank you.
And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Yates. It might take you 5 minutes to switch over and set up.
Yes.
Okay.
Take a 5-minute recess. All right, we'll reconvene our meeting.
Okay. I've already introduced you.
Excellent. Good afternoon, Commissioners, Cindy, everybody at home. We're here today to kind of talk about the operating capital budget. As you remember, we started the process the end of February, start of March, talking about the projections document, laying out some initial looks at what we thought some of the drivers were, some of the budgetary changes and so forth. And then at that time we talked about our process being more so to meet with SPCC's board as a joint meeting, the school board as a joint meeting. We wanted to talk about water and sewer rates, which you received earlier, and then kind of go into the budget work sessions, kind of based on, at that time, where you as a board wanted to go. In the past, we've done more focused work sessions that dealt with specific issues. In the past, fire funding, for instance, economic development. We've done water and sewer. We've done the reval and so forth. And this year we didn't have those looming issues to look at. So this year was more focused on working with our outside partners, working with the new superintendent and so forth. So what we have today is more of an update check-in. Cindy and I talked about it and wanted to kind of give you where we are. I'll caveat this discussion with we're not done yet. Working with the fire departments, and I'll talk a little bit about that in more detail. Trying to close that feedback loop and spend more time talking and more time in conversation. As you know, we adopted a new contract last summer and kind of working through how that works and working with our school system as they've got a lot of new staff over there. So this process, more so than in past years, has been more fluid, which I know makes me just excited as a planner, but I'm surviving through. So today we want to talk about where are we in the process, what are we talking about with, or what are we seeing in our strategic drivers? What issues are really driving that process? How we approached balancing the budget. At this point, the general fund is in balance. It's not, we haven't completely closed off discussions, but we're in balance. Process and direction, then what would you like to see from the rest of that process? And I'll give you some detail and kind of talk about some of those strategic drivers and the balancing principles. So where are we in the process? The way our process works is departments start with entering their budget in, and that's our data collection process. That's our modified zero base, and when we talk about modified, we start by, populate the personnel numbers, and then departments populate everything else that goes in there, and it's a process of ranking and prioritizing and looking at expansions, any expansion of services, how that's cost, really driving at a good cost of service model. Because what we want to do is look at what it costs to provide those services. During that same time period, while they're working through their departmental budgets, our service area budgets, we're working on the projections report. That's when we're looking at the external influencers, drivers, economics, and those kinds of things. And that's what culminates that report that you see at the start of the process. Then we go through a line item review with the departments that Cindy and I think we spent 4 or 5 weeks this time, locked up in our offices, having everyone come through and actually have that conversation. And that's everybody that participates in that process. EMS included, all the fire departments, SBCC came in, and so forth. So all those folks that get funding from the county come through that dialogue process, and we have the conversation about what's driving your services, what trends are you seeing in your specific area. And then from that dialogue, we go then to our balancing process. So then we try to apply some principles, and Cindy and I kind of sit down at the beginning, we talk about what are we trying to do this year with the budget, what have we heard from you as a board, what are we seeing in our service drivers, and so forth. And then we have that follow-up dialogue, trying to close the communication loop. And that's kind of where we are right now in the process. Following up with fire departments, following up with everybody involved, with the individual service areas, kind of saying, this is what we were thinking we would recommend. What comments, you want to come back and talk about it again. I know we've had multiple conversations with several fire departments. Several departments have come back and wanted to talk about different pieces. So what are our strategic budget drivers that we're seeing this year? And I think you'll see this kind of carry over from what we talked about in the projections report. We're continuing to see that changing demographics in Union County. The population is changing, so our service demands are changing. How we provide the services, where we see service growth, what the residents are expecting from us, particularly in the community services and emergency services and so forth. Our changing service delivery models, one of the things we like to do as we go through that zero-based process is we like to go back and look at how we're providing that service in some cases, particularly when it comes to contractual relationships versus providing the service in-house. And are we getting the benefit that we thought we would get? Are we achieving the savings, or are we providing the services at the level we wanted to? We looking at our legacy commitments, and this specifically relates to OPEB, our post-employment benefits, and the liability we carry there, and our retirement commitments. So these are the legacy commitments, generally of our population, our workforce. Our debt service commitments, as you know, in the fall, the GO election occurred, and the residents approved the GO bond, so you'll see that coming up in this process as well. And then our comprehensive public safety model. And one of the things we looked at during the projections report is kind of how we provide or what are driving the various services. And when we talk about comprehensive public safety, we're not just talking about police and fire, which are kind of the more traditional construct, but we're talking about our emergency communications, fire marshal, our emergency medical services, the environmental health and inspections, fire protection, our human services, particularly in the child protective services, adult protective services areas, and our health department and our communicable diseases and so forth, and then our sheriff's office. Those are in no particular order, in alphabetical order in this case. And I just want to remind you, if you kind of remember, we're talking about what our budget drivers are. We saw this slide during our presentation on the projections, where we can see our 911 calls. We're up 220% from 2010 to today, and that's pretty stiff. 210%. That's a pretty stiff increase calls per emergency communicator. And that's quite a few calls going on down there. And then also, you remember this slide on the permit site visits, and this is what we're expecting. It's about a 60% increase in services and the inspections going on in environmental services. So this is what informed our budget process as we started looking at that. So as we were sitting down and talking about how do we address those drivers. And then we sat down and said, okay, we know we can't afford to do it all. And I think we talked about, when we were here for projections, we were probably $10 million out of balance when you take everything requested by departments and then what our revenue sources were. So we kind of have to go back, how do we then pare back that request to balance it? The first thing we always want to do, and I think this is what you clearly stated as a board, is we want to make any changes we make to be sustainable. So we want to give you a budget that you can adopt and that provides the services at a level that you want and that is sustainable into the future. And that there's a lot that goes into that, but first and foremost, sustainability. Secondly, public safety, and that's addressing the full spectrum. And I'll spend a little more time talking about this in a few minutes, but we really took the position this year when we looked at fire services that this is a bridging year to the kind of the future of what we do with fire services. We know that we will be looking at fire funding again, and we'll talk a little bit more about it in detail. But knowing that, we kind of had to address that pent-up demand from departments for being frozen for 2 years. So looking at this year is how do we employ some short-term solutions, some long-term strategies, as well as then setting the stage for going into the future. We also looked at a risk-based assessment. Where are the areas in public safety as a spectrum where we need the resources most, and then putting those additional resources at the point of service delivery. So in this budget, my anticipation, if it continues where we're at, what you'll see is staffing and resources more on the front line aspects of service provision than adding management or anything like that. Resource allocation, addressing service demands with additional resources. Capital planning, we always work to try to match one-time resources with one-time items. We do a good job with our fund balance, so you'll see us using fund balance as our capital planning tool. And that's a common strategy that we use to be able to take care of smaller capital projects without incurring debt as we go forward. Strategic workforce, how we address our long-term workforce development. This includes our comp and class study, our performance pay pool, our workforce planning. That includes training and all those different aspects. Our debt service commitments, as I mentioned earlier. Our service delivery model changes. We reviewed our efficiency, look both short-term and long-term, and we also look for technology-based efficiencies. So moving that production or frontier curve, if you will, on how we provide services better so we have investment in technology and so forth. And tax rate considerations, looking at how do we, where possible, we keep the rate the same, and only when necessary we recommend rate increases. So then how do we apply these? And so I'm going to go through some high-level areas that we have built in at this point. We're addressing the post-employment benefit. Right now we have 100% of the actuarially required contribution. And the actuarially required contribution represents the amount of money we should invest every year into our OPEB benefits so that when those benefits start paying out, there's not a drain on the county's current resources. Okay, so it's an investment in the future. It helps reduce that long-term liability. Right now, this is done through two tools. This is done through current revenue and a little bit of fund balance to help offset that as a bridging technique or as a short-term strategy to kind of, as we grow into that full payment. Our 3% performance pool. Our recommendation at this point is no changes in the general county government tax rate. No changes in the emergency medical services tax. But we are recommending that they use the fund balance, that EMS uses the fund balance it has on its books to fund new ambulances this year. This is a short-term strategy and will ultimately lead us to, in the next couple of years, needing to budget for additional replacement. But at this point, we felt like they were still in catch-up mode and they have enough resources on their side to be able to balance that and buy the additional units that they needed. We're going to add a new tax rate for the general obligation. We're recommending adding a new tax rate for general obligation bonds as approved by the voters. It's going to be about 3.1 cents. I know in the literature it was about 3.13, but we've seen additional growth in our ad valorem base. We were projecting about 1.5%. We're probably around 2.3% growth. So that's a positive. That allows us to reduce that rate a little bit. And if you'll remember, we're going ahead and introducing this rate at this point because that allows us to smooth out the rate increase. Instead of having a higher spike or a higher max year, 3.1 will allow us to, over time, ease that down to about 6 or 7 years, give or take. But it keeps us from going to, say, 3.5, 3.6 if we did adjust in time. So that'll allow us to build up some of that balance. Capital funding, one-time items again with one-time money. You'll see, for instance, in the recommendation at this point is the courthouse work, and that's funded with fund balance versus going out and borrowing debt for that, which we believe is a good strategy. Fire funding, and I want to spend a few minutes on this because I know this is kind of a particular interest for you as a board and for those folks at home. And this is kind of where we are. We're not done talking with at least one fire department. We haven't concluded the recommendation. So this is still in flux a little bit in draft. What we're recommending at this point is that there be a fire tax increase of about 0.55 cents. It's 5/10, 55.55 per 1,000. And additionally, in these tax districts, we would recommend increases on Mineral Springs of a penny, 1.3 cents, and that's really to provide staffing. I believe it's Station 18 over by the golf course. It's not currently staffed 24/7, but runs about 40-45% of their calls. So that district's growing in population over by the solar farm and so forth, and in the number of calls that Chief Caddy is running. So we're recommending that. Henry Bridge, we're looking at almost 0.2 of an increase, and that's again also to provide station staffing for Chief Blythe and his group. All the fee districts at this time are recommended to go to $100, and this is really more of an outcome of we know that a fire fee model doesn't really provide sufficient funding, particularly when you start talking about staffing. We'll talk about that in just a second. But these were the only 4 fire stations or fire departments that were still either all volunteer or mostly volunteer. I think we have, if the recommendation holds, we'll have 1 truly still volunteer station. All the rest will have staffing in some form or fashion, whether part-time or full-time. And that would be Griffith Road would be the remaining all volunteer. But you can see here, Baker's, it's $13 increase, Griffith Road a $28 increase, Jackson, which was our lowest fee district at $36, and that's really due to adding staffing at Jackson. That'd be 2 positions, I believe 24/7. And that's driven by 2 things. In these areas, with the exception of Baker's, these other 3 the density isn't there. When you look at fire fees, the only way a fire fee comes close to working is if it's in a really highly dense area and there's a lot of units to charge. These don't have them. So when you're talking about $1 of fire fee in Jackson, it generates $1,200. So even $100 fire fee doesn't generate sufficient funding to provide for staffing at that point. Because a full-time, 24 hours, 7-day-a-week position or slot is about $120,000. So when you start looking at that, it's real easy to tip over that $100 benchmark. And then Baker's, it's due to really Baker's, in their case, with the call volume and the density and where they're at, they're more like Stallings, Henry Bridge, those other tax districts in which they're kind of all surrounded by. The $100 fee is insufficient to supply or provide for that. And you have additional stations, or additional station costs and that kind of stuff. So when we started looking at our current recommendation, we have about $1.5 million of additional staffing that we would recommend putting on at this point. One of the ways we help bridge the gap without raising the fire tax is we're recommending about $900,000, almost just shy of $1 million, be transferred from the general fund for one-time items. And this is mainly for SCBA and small trucks or vehicle. I think there's a light response vehicle and then like a squad car or a unit car in that equation. And the capital funding of about $373,000 And this is going to be recommended, this is a little bit of a change for us from the past. We're recommending at this point that the departments be allowed to purchase their apparatus and to finance it. And we've made some estimations about what the pricing would cost and what the financing would cost. So we've built in about $373,000 for payments, and that's a pretty significant chunk of additional vehicles or additional apparatus that are coming. And then there are additional station requests of about $6 million, and that was for land. There's 2 or 3 stations in there, and so forth. And what we're recommending on these stations is that at this point, we kind of just take a step back and have a comprehensive discussion about where those stations need to be located. There's a study going on in Indian Trail, with Indian Trail, Hemby, Stallings is involved, and you have the Stallings Fire Department, the Hemby Bridge Fire Department, Baker's is joined in, and I think Wesley Chapel's involved in that discussion also. So looking at kind of where those stations, and 2 of the stations that have been discussed are at Stallings and Hemby Bridge. Where those stations need to be in relationship to the demographic shifts and those kinds of things. And looking at, for instance, Fairview and what they do there, and there's a couple of others involved in that. So in lieu of funding at this point, what we want to do is come back and have that strategy. Because I don't think at this that we could cash fund, or we would cash fund those, but how we work with the fire departments to help them get construction, help them do locate and size those fire stations, I think is an important step. So kind of applying that principle, for comparison, I just want to kind of show you where we work. So if you're looking at the fire funding, this is the 2017, if you remember we were frozen in 16 and 17, so this is the very similar to the 16 budget, about $10.7 million. In this year's request, you had about $23.9, almost $24 million requested. Again, about half of this in capital is fire stations, the other half is in apparatus. And of course, you had in personnel, just shy of doubling the personnel. What's recommended, or what we anticipate to be recommended at this point, is about $5 million in personnel, about $4 million for operating, which isn't a significant increase, and then about $4.3 million in capital. And that involves the capital funding, existing payments, additional apparatus, and so forth. And then those, you can see those increases. So we're recommending about a $2.6 million increase across all of the fire departments. That involves, again, then taking some of those tax rates higher, taking the fire fee districts and so forth up, and then supplementing that then with the general tax dollar. One thing I wanted to kind of mention, because I know that this is going to be probably one of the questions, is we think that over the next year, probably starting midsummer, maybe late summer, that is to come back. We need to come back to the long-term funding discussion and solution for fire funding. And we've had some discussion with staff, and I think with several commissioners, to talk about maybe bringing in some outside help, because I know as staff, it's all kind of, in our minds, there's variations on the theme, but there's only a couple of ways to skin this cat. And there's just a few, they're all kind of slices of those different themes. So maybe getting someone with a fresh eye to look at it, partnering with several fire departments and several stakeholders in that process to try to figure out then how do we go forward, or how do we move forward in the long term with a sustainable fire funding model. And you can see the pent-up demand, even if you were to back out the $6 million in new stations, the pent-up demand of about $16 million, give or take, $17 million, that's pretty extensive. And looking back then, how we do that, we know that inching these rates up and maxing out the fire fees over time, this is only a bridging technique. And we can see then, and also this, interjecting about $1 million from the general fund is only going to get us to next year. So we need to kind of put into play a long-term solution. And I think that that's where as staff, that we are at this point, that we're ready to kind of sit back down after the budget process and when we're not under the pressure of the budget and kind of talk through how do we achieve that. You have a contract in place, and there's different strategies out there. We're working with the fire departments and figuring out how we do that.
I think another important component of this is that the study that's being done with Hembree, Stallings, and Indian Trail is supposed to be done around June. So hopefully we'll have some recommendations that come out of that, as well as to, you know, are some of these towns considering going to municipal fire departments? Which will then, I think, feed into, okay, what is the longer range strategy as it relates to fire funding?
Commissioner?
Would you explain for viewing audience the difference between fee and the $100?
The difference between the fee and the tax districts?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. So we have 5 tax districts, 3 service districts, and 2 rural fire protection districts. Right, fire protection districts. And what they do is, instead of having a fee per house like the other district, or like the fee districts, they pay a tax rate, just like it's a special services district. So, for instance, if you live in Mineral Springs, which I live in, I pay about 5 cents for fire protection, just like I would a general property tax. If you live in a fee
5
district,
cents per thousand,
right,
clarify, yeah.
5 cents per thousand, sorry. If you live in a fee district and you have a house, you pay a flat $100 or whatever that fire fee is. So for instance, if you're in Jackson, there's about 1,200 parcels in Jackson, and if they all paid $100, that generates the amount of revenue that goes into that. So the fee districts are capped at $100. The fire service districts, depending upon what type they are, I believe it's 15 cents is their cap. So what we're trying to reconcile in this process is, how do we supplement the fire cost in those fee districts, because in most cases they're more rural and have a lower density than the tax districts do. Is that?
Yeah,
That's a
and
question.
I guess one of the points, whether you've got a $1 million house or a $30,000 trailer, you still pay the 100.
Right. In the fee districts, regardless of the value of your house, you pay the $100 fee, unlike the tax districts. So again, like I said, we believe that kind of coming back to it later in the summer, before the budget process kind of gets into the debate or into the discussion, and working really focused in on the smaller group, looking at how we would do that. From this point, and this is kind of where I want to open it back up to you guys, is to give us a little bit more direction, any additional direction concerning the balancing principles, talk about additional work sessions. Given the changes with UCPS and some of those ongoing discussions, traditionally we've delivered the budget the 1st of May. We don't anticipate doing that this year. What we had anticipated is in about mid-May delivering that document to you. So our process is going to be just a little pushed back. Hopefully we're going to get schools around the 5th of May, and it didn't make sense to me or Cindy to issue a budget on the 1st or 2nd, and 3 days later get the school's budget at the same time. So, and then our anticipation, we would anticipate having our public hearing at the first meeting in June, and that's the 10-day clock that you're required by general statute. Once you have that public hearing, then after the 10th day, you can adopt the budget at any point after that. So I want to go back to the top. I went through them as kind of our approach. Is there any questions or additional direction that you have for us on the balancing principles? Kind of our approach to how we attack this. Okay. And with that, right now we have some dates that we can have work sessions. I think we're intending to have additional work sessions. I believe there's already been a request for a fire funding discussion and looking at that. Do you have additional direction for us on the work session process?
Are we going to get the working document like we have in the past?
You will. That's the anticipation about mid-May.
That's mid-May.
Right.
But the intention is, prior to the delivery of that document, we would at least have a work session that goes into a deeper dive into the overall budget.
Any additional direction on that? Okay, let's get the 2 work sessions scheduled, and then
Well, let me ask the board. I know that we had one commissioner who had asked for a work session on fire funding. as part of the budget discussion, do you all want a work session on fire funding? Do you want us to have a work session on that separate and distinct from the budget as we talk about how we're gonna look at long-term strategy? We definitely will do one as it relates to the overall budget and at least what the manager's recommendation is as to where additional resources need to be provided.
I would like to have a discussion on anything where there's a significant change in the budget year over year. So fire, for example, if there's a proposal of a $13 million increase, I think that's something we need to discuss. If there's any particular department that's looking at a significant increase year over year, that should be part of the discussion as well.
Well, and what we were going to do, and we haven't put it together, but as part of the overall budget, is where we were going to focus on any new programs or initiatives that were part of the budget, what associated resources there were associated with that new program, as well as where we had to put any kind of significant resources. For example, one of the ones we talked about was environmental health. And we all know that we have a backlog in environmental health. So I will tell you that is one of the areas that we will talk about in a little bit more depth as to how we propose to address that through some of it is staffing, some of it is looking at the rates, some of the inspections that we do that we don't charge anything for, that we really should be charging some sort of a fee for, the annual inspections we have to do on some of the systems. So that's kind of what we were looking at is to versus looking at every budget overall, but those where there were, yes, significant changes. And so that's what we plan to bring back to you before you are actually presented with the document and then have to vote on it. So is that in keeping with what the board would like to see?
Yeah.
I think that
That's
we
all I have.
have received the direction we need.
All right, very good. Thank you all.
Thank you.
I'll call for a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, none.